Okay, now we're starting topic G, which is about division of fractions and decimal fractions. This can be a very difficult part of the module for students, but we're going to keep relating it back to what we already know about division of whole numbers and thinking about that as we go forward. So you'll listen for that as we go. So here's a typical problem that we'll see at the very beginning. 2 divided by 1/2. And what we want to think about first is modeling that always using a tape diagram, of course. And I'm going to draw that tape diagram like this. And that whole thing is going to equal 2. And I'm going to use different colors when I teach this because I want them to see, usually a lot of times we think of the whole thing as 1, but in this case the whole is 2. And we want to think about that. And now I want to divide it by 1/2, which means I want to know, just like in whole numbers, when I say 10 divided by 2, I want to know how many 2's are in 10. The same thing applies here. How many halves are in 2? So that means every 1 I've got to divide up into a half. So I'm going to divide that one in half, and I'm going to divide that one half. Now I can count how many halves there are in 2. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there are 4 1/2s in 2. Complicated. Another way to think about it is with a number line. And we're going to be drawing number lines directly under our tape diagrams to help them see how the models are similar. I'll make that the same. I'll put my 1 right there. And then it's asking for me to split it into halves, and so I will do that. And then I will count those distances. 1, 2, 3, 4. It takes 4 distances of a half to get to 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's where we get our 4 from. Now, this problem says 5 divided by 1/4. Same idea. Tape diagram. This time the whole thing is equal to 5. I'm going to want to split it up into the wholes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. And then I'm going to divide it by into fourths. So again, with red, I'm going to divide it into fourths. And I want to make sure that I do it for each one because I'm trying to find out, just like with whole numbers, how many fourths are in 5. So I have to know how many fourths are in 1 and then count how many would be in 5. Now we'll encourage kids to not count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but rather count by 4s. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. There are 20 1/4ths in the number 5. In the second part of this topic, we're going to reverse it. Instead of 2 divided by 1/2 or divided by 1/5, we're going to start with a fraction and split that up into 2 parts. And we're going to help kids to think about it that way first, that we're starting with a piece and then we're going to cut it up into 2 pieces, making it even smaller. So we're going to get an even smaller number than 1/5 right off the bat, just thinking-wise. And we'll model it again with our tape diagram. Only this time, the whole has to be 1 because we're starting with 1/5. We're always starting with this number over here. And now I've got to make fifths. There's my 5th, and I'm going to shade that in one direction. Pretty neatly like that, because I'm going to want to see something in a moment. Now I'm going to take that 1/5 and I'm going to do what it says. Divide it into 2 pieces. So I'm going to cut that right down the middle and I'm going to shade that the other direction there. As if somebody's using a pencil or a pen, you won't be able to tell with color which part that is. And now what I need to know is, what is this out of the whole thing? So I know what to call that piece. And to know that, I have to figure out how many of these are in the whole thing. Well, I can count them. 1, 2, and there'll be 2 in this one. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of them fit in the whole thing, which means that this is 1/10. And that is what that equals. Again, it makes sense with what we said before, because a fifth split into 2 pieces has to be smaller than a fifth. And 1/10 is. Here's another example, a half divided by 8. Again, we're going to take 1/2 and then split it into 8 pieces. It's going to get much smaller than a half. So let's take a look at what happens when we make our diagram. There's our whole. There is 1/2. Shade that in. There's 1/2. And now I got to take that, just the 1/2, and cut it into 8 pieces. And I only get one of those. Just that little piece there. And again, I got to figure out, what is that called? And there are 8 of them in half of this, and another 8 over here for a total of 16. Meaning this one piece is 1 out of 16, or 1/16. Okay, now we're going to look at that work that we just did in terms of problems. And we'll be solving problems where sometimes we have to divide a whole number by a fraction, and then sometimes divide a fraction by a whole number. So here's our first problem. Mr. Kana made 3 mini cakes for a birthday party. He cut each cake into quarters to serve for his guests. How many guests can he serve? So here's a word that we're going to want kids to know. Quarters, it has to do with money, it has to do with fractions as well. When we think about quarters, we know we mean fourths. It's one we've used many times before, but kids should know that if they don't. So I've got my 3 mini cakes. And I got 3 mini cakes, and I'm dividing it up into quarters, which means it's this problem, which I will model like so. This is a whole number divided by a fraction like we did before. So I know that the whole thing here is my 3 cakes. There are my 3 cakes. And then I'm dividing each one of them up into fourths. And how many fourths do I have? 4, 8, 12. There would be 12. It'll serve 12 guests. Will be served. There's a good sentence. And here we have the second type of problem. Rick has 1/4 of a pan of lasagna in the fridge. He wants to cut it into 3 equal parts so that he can have it for dinner the next 3 nights. What fraction of the pan will he eat each night? And again, this time, we've got the problem, I'm starting with 1/4 of a pan, and I'm dividing it into 3 parts. That's this kind of problem where I'm taking a fraction, dividing it by a whole number. So I'm again going to model it with my tape diagram. This time, of course, this has to be equal to 1. And I'm going to divide it up into 4 equal parts. Shade that one part to represent 1/4. And now I need that 1/4 divided into 3 parts. And I'm going to shade that one of those 3 parts. And what I have to figure out is, what is this one little part out of the whole thing, so I know what to call it. And there are 3 in each one of these parts, so 3, 6, 9, 12 of them, meaning this has to be 1/12. And that's how the fraction of the pan, I'm getting 1/12 of the pan is how much I'll get to eat each night. That's not going to be enough to fill me.